In this video, I'm going to tell you about your paint colors, why they're not really important, but sometimes they are. I think that there are, and I'm pretty sure I'm dead on accurate here, 166 billion paint companies out there, give or take. There's a lot, and there's a lot of companies out there, and there's a lot of people making videos out on YouTube. These are both true facts. You can definitely, look at those and go, yep, that's true. Here's the deal. A lot of times you will be watching a paint tutorial and someone will be talking about, okay, now we're going to do this step, and then they will show you the color of the paint. And they will say, this is the color that I'm using, and this is the brand name, and this is the serial number. Sometimes in a lot of paint tutorial videos, you will see all of the paints in a big list before the video even starts so that you can make sure, evidently, so that you're all set at home so that you can be painting along with the person in the tutorial. And I guess I'm here to tell you that none of that actually matters. It sounds harsh, but honestly, the paints don't matter. Now, I'm not saying that you should just use whatever garbage you find on the ground and use it to paint. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying that the paints that you like totally matter because the paints that you like give you the best results to whatever you're painting, whether it's something simple in tabletop or whether it's something super fancy in display. What I'm saying is that when you're watching tutorials or you're reading along with tutorials, first of all, understand who's doing the tutorial. If it's a company that sells paint, I will guarantee you that they will predominantly show you their own paints, which, that's how marketing works. I get that. But if you're watching somebody who's not affiliated with a paint brand, they will probably, because most of us do this, kind of hop all over the place from manufacturer to manufacturer. Well, I like this color from Citadel, and I like this color from Vallejo, and I like this color from Reaper, and this color from Warcolor, and this color from Army Painter. I do the same thing. Most of us do. The trick is that you need to figure out when you're watching these people who are doing the tutorials, you need to understand that that's not the end-all be-all color that has to happen in that particular situation. Obviously, nobody actually goes through step by step and follows along with a tutorial and uses the same colors that the person in the tutorial uses and goes through and then tries to compare theirs against the person in the tutorial. At least I don't know anybody who's ever done that. The reason they show you the colors generally is so that you understand that in certain situations, like if the pants are supposed to be blue and you decide that if you're painting the exact same model that they need to be brown, then you can do that. What they're doing sometimes is they're saying, look, I started with this color and now I'm going to highlight with this color so that you can kind of see the relationship between the two colors. And again, it's more just kind of showing you the colors, not necessarily showing you the brand and the specific make and model and all that kind of stuff. Those parts aren't important. All of us as we paint have a tendency to sort of stick into a palette. And it's partially because it's the paints that we own. And every once in a while you go, I really need a darker brown than the one that I have here. And then so you go to the store and you buy something. But it doesn't really matter that you watched a video in which they said, well, you have to use this brown. Don't follow that religiously. Understand that when they're trying to show you in these tutorials, this is the color I used, and then this is the color I shaded it with, and this is the color I highlighted it with. If you went to them and said, well, based off of that, what if I use this, this, and this instead? In general, pretty much every painter out there would be like, yeah, you can totally do that. You don't have to follow, exactly along with what I'm doing. However, the problem is that I've heard that excuse, and I'm going to call it an excuse, before. I've heard people saying, I really want to get started on this project, but I just don't have the right color of paint because I can't find that manufacturer. Paint colors are much alike. There are a lot of times when you can take two colors that are pretty close from different manufacturers and you could paint them on something and 50-50 people won't be able to tell the difference. As long as they're close, it doesn't matter. You may have a preference. You may say, I only like this type of paint or that type of paint because of the properties of the paint and the pigments and this and that and the other thing, and that's fine. But I can guarantee you that not being able to find exactly the right color should ever stop you from getting something painted. If anything is wrong and you're like, I just need a darker version of this, and man, I just can't find it at my local shop or I can't whatever, you can just add black or some other darker color to a color to kind of learning how to mix paints is very useful when you need to do that. Now, if you're going to be painting your entire army a specific color, now that's a different story. When the paint actually starts to matter is when you want to sit down and paint an entire army. In general, armies kind of all wear the same clothes or the same armor or the same I don't know, pelts or whatever, depending on, what kind of army you're painting. So if you're going to sit down and start painting, let's say, an Adeptus Mechanicus army for 40K, and you've decided you want to go with the standard kind of red, Mars red style theme, if you've only got a bit of red right now, then that's a thing you should concern yourself with. A lot of times I tell you, don't worry about the paint so much. You can go back and forth. You can kind of change things up, and that's fine. But in this situation, if you're going to be working on a project, you definitely want to make sure that you have enough, if it's a big project, paint to be able to do the entire thing. I'm working on a detachment of Adeptus Mechanicus actually right now. And one of the first things I did is I went out and bought a bunch of red primer from Vallejo so that this is going to be going through my airbrush and it's going to be the basis for the army. But I didn't go out and buy one bottle. I went out and bought 3 because I figured hopefully I should be able to get through the entire army with this much primer. Planning ahead like that is very important for working on your project, on your big projects. And then at that point, understanding the paint and the primer that you want to definitely use, putting that time in, that's important. Because if I go halfway through this project and then have to switch to a different primer or a different color of red or whatever, when you set up that whole thing, you're going to notice. And that's another important point. When you are setting up to paint an entire army, and I've talked about this in the past, you want to be very specific about the paints that you are going to be using for that project. Again, don't worry about what they say in the tutorials. Don't worry about, getting everything all the same brand. Mixing and matching is fine. But when you have decided this is the way that they will be painted, at the end of that process, you should have a recipe written down, whether you write it on a piece of paper, whether you punch it into your phone so you don't lose it, or whatever the deal is. Having that information is super important because as you paint an army, and if it's a big army, it'll take you probably some time. Your memory might be awesome. Mine's garbage, but it's probably not as good. Your memory is probably not as good as you might like to think. And at some point, you'll be sitting there going, did I use brown wash or black wash at that point when in the step by step? Because you should be figuring and thinking about the step by step. So as you do it and you figure it all out and you do your test model, let's say, if you're going to go down that direction, be sure to write down every last thing so that when you get done, and then 6 months goes by, and now you want to pick up again and start going into it, you can just pull up that document, whatever, and look at it and go, okay, I need this and this and this. And at that point, making sure to have the actual paint numbers or brands or whatever, all that stuff, at that point, that information becomes very important. So don't worry about going out and buying all the paints that you may see in a specific tutorial, because that won't actually get you what you want if you're trying to get that exact same result that the person in the tutorial, came up with. 3 people could sit down and follow step by step a recipe that I could make up on how to paint something, and they could all use the same paints, and it would still look different from each other. So don't even worry about that. Look at it and understand as you're watching the tutorial that this is the way the colors can layer on each other. This is the way that washes can layer over colors and that kind of stuff. And that's what the painter in that situation is actually trying to show you. They're not saying if you don't use this specific number 12 purple, the whole project is lost. That's not the thing. But on the other hand, don't be so cavalier with your paints when you are working on a big project. Make sure that the paints that you start with are hopefully the paints that you end with so that your entire army has the same kind of overall look when you're done with it, because that kind of mismatch over the course of an entire army, if you're anything like me, will come back and really, really make you annoyed.